Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're asking something really important for anyone building a business. How do you actually lock down your most valuable stuff, your intellectual property, so it's safe, but doesn't, cripple your actual operations?
Yeah, we're talking patents, trademarks, copyrights, the secret ingredients, really.
Exactly. How do you build a proper fortress around that IP?
Well, we've been looking into this, sort of borrowing ideas from estate planning, looking at actual IP trusts, the practical side of making sure those intangible assets are genuinely secure.
Because the nightmare scenario, right, is your business hits a snag, maybe a lawsuit, maybe just a bad downturn, and boom, those patents you poured everything into are suddenly at risk.
Nobody wants that.
So our mission today is to figure out how separating your IP, putting it into a trust, can work as a shield, basically, while letting the business just keep running smoothly.
And just to be clear, when we say IP here, we mean those core things giving you an edge. So patents for inventions, trademarks for your brand, copyrights for creative stuff, even those, closely guarded trade secrets.
The stuff that makes you unique.
Exactly. And a trust, well, it's potentially a great vehicle for holding all of that securely.
Okay, let's dig into that. What's the basic idea? How does taking IP ownership away from the operating business actually help?
So the core concept is simple, really. You set up a separate legal entity that's the trust, and that trust becomes the legal owner of your IP.
Okay.
Think of it like a super secure vault, just for your most valuable ideas and creations.
Right, a vault, and that's separate from the factory floor.
Yeah, exactly. Separate from the kitchen, let's say your operating business, the part that's actually making things, selling things, dealing with customers day to day.
So the trust has the blueprints, but the kitchen still gets to use them. How does that work?
Precisely. The operating business doesn't own the IP anymore. Instead, it gets the right to use it. And that happens through a formal licensing agreement with the trust.
Ah, okay. So there's a contract between the two.
Yes, and that legal separation is absolutely fundamental. It's the whole point, really.
Right. Okay. I think I'm getting the picture now.
Yeah.
So what are the big upsides? What's the real payoff for doing this? It sounds like some legal hoops to jump through.
Oh, definitely some hoops, but the benefits can be significant. First, like we mentioned, it's about protection, a really robust layer against business risks.
Meaning lawsuits, creditors.
Exactly. If the operating business gets sued or has creditor problems, maybe even faces bankruptcy, the IP held safely in the trust is generally insulated. It's not seen as the operating business's asset.
Okay, that's huge. What else?
Second, it really streamlines control. You can centralize your whole IP portfolio. You have a trustee who manages it all, renewals, licenses, maybe even enforcement if someone infringes.
Easier management then.
Can be, yeah.
Okay.
Third, and this is crucial, the business keeps using the IP. That license agreement makes sure of that. It's not locked away uselessly.
Right. It needs to be usable.
Of course. And finally, honestly, it's peace of mind for the owner. Knowing your foundational assets, your crown jewels, are protected from the daily ups and downs of the operating side.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so practically speaking, how does this work? What are the actual steps if someone wants to set up an IP trust?
Okay, well, there are a few key stages. First, you actually have to create the trust itself. That involves a legal document, the trust agreement. It spells out the rules, the purpose, who benefits, how it's run.
Standard trust stuff, basically.
Pretty much. Then, the really important part. You legally transfer ownership of the IP, the patents, trademarks, whatever, into the name of the trust.
So the trust becomes the owner on paper.
Exactly. Then you appoint a trustee, someone responsible for managing those assets according to the trust rules.
Right.
And finally, the operating business signs that formal license agreement with the trust. That agreement details how the business can use the IP and often what it pays for that, right? Royalties, license fees, that kind of thing.
And that agreement needs to be solid, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. It needs to be carefully drafted, give the business the rights it needs, but maintains that clear legal separation.
Okay. And those royalties or fees you mentioned, where does that money go? Does it just sit in the trust?
Well, the license agreement dictates the payment flow from the business to the trust. What the trust does with that money depends on the rules set up in the trust document. It could pay out income to beneficiaries, maybe reinvest in developing more IP, or just hold the funds. Depends on the goals.
Okay. And just to really hammer this home, this structure provides that safety net. If the business hits turbulence, the IP in the trust is generally okay.
Generally, yes, that's the core benefit. Because the trust is a separate legal owner, the IP isn't typically seen as an asset of the operating business if there's legal trouble or financial distress. That distinct ownership is key.
Okay, sounds good legally. But what about the real world? Does setting up an IP trust actually make a difference businesses can feel?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Think about perception. When you strategically separate your IP like this, it sends a really strong signal.
A signal to who?
Yeah.
Customers?
Customers, yes, but perhaps even more importantly, to investors. It says you're serious about protecting your core value. It builds credibility.
Investors. I can see that.
Yeah, investors often feel much more secure knowing that the company's crown jewels, the key IP, are shielded from operational risks, less perceived risk.
And less risk could mean easier funding, better valuation.
Potentially, yes. It can definitely smooth the fundraising path because investors see less vulnerability around those core assets. Shows good management, foresight.
Okay, so it's a signal of being mature, thinking ahead. What about financial angles? Tax benefits, maybe. People always want to know about the bottom line impact.
Right. Well, there can be potential tax advantages. It depends heavily on the specifics, of course. Things like maybe managing income flows from royalties more strategically, or potentially benefits related to capital gains on the IP's value over the long term, or even planning for passing the IP on eventually.
So on the capital gains.
Depending on the structure and, the jurisdiction, there might be ways to achieve more favorable long-term capital gains treatment when the IP appreciates in value. But
There's always a but with taxes.
always, it's really complex. Tax laws vary hugely, and the specifics of your situation matter enormously. So I have to stress this. Anyone even thinking about this needs proper advice from a qualified accountant or tax advisor who understands this area. Don't guess.
Absolutely. Critical point.
Yeah.
Get expert financial advice. Okay, maybe an example would help crystallize this. Can you walk us through a hypothetical?
Sure. Let's imagine Jamie. Jamie starts a tech company, comes up with a really breakthrough patent for some new sustainable material. Cool stuff.
Okay.
Jamie knows bigger companies might come knocking, maybe legally. So, being savvy, Jamie transfers that key patent into an IP trust early on. The startup then licenses the technology back from the trust to use in its products. Standard setup.
All right.
A few years later, the startup gets hit with a major lawsuit. Importantly, it's unrelated to the patent itself, maybe a contract dispute, something operational.
Okay, so trouble for the business, but not about the invention itself.
Exactly. Now, because the patent is legally owned by the separate trust, it's not an asset of the operating business that's being sued. So the lawsuit can proceed, but the patent itself is protected. It's safe. Jamie's core innovation isn't on the line.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That really shows the shield in action. Even if the main business stumbles, the core idea is secure. That's pretty powerful.
It can be, yeah. It allowed the business to handle the lawsuit without risking losing its foundational technology.
That's a great example. Can you think of another situation where this structure might be really useful? Maybe for a bigger company with multiple brands?
Oh, definitely. Good scenario. Imagine a company, right? It owns several different brands. Each has its own trademarks, maybe some patents tied to specific products under those brands.
Okay, like a consumer goods company or something?
Could be, yeah. Now, instead of each brand's operating division owning its own specific IP, the parent company could put all the IP, all trademarks, all relevant patents into one single central IP trust.
One big vault for everything.
Exactly. What does that do? Well, it centralizes management. One trustee oversees all the licenses to the different brand divisions, handles renewals for everything, probably more efficient.
Makes sense.
And crucially, protection again. Let's say brand A gets into some legal hot water, a lawsuit specific to that brand. Well, the trademarks and patents for brand B, brand C, etc., they're all sitting safely in that central trust. They aren't directly exposed just because brand A has a problem.
So trouble in one part of the business doesn't automatically endanger the IP of the other parts.
Precisely. It compartmentalizes the risk, at least regarding the core IP assets, like a central fortress protecting all the different parts of the kingdom's treasure.
We mentioned investors earlier, their confidence. Can you elaborate a bit more on why seeing IP in a trust reassures them?
Yeah, let's take another example. Alex's startup. They developed some cool new software, got a patent on the core algorithm. Alex goes out to raise venture capital. Now, what do VCs do? Due diligence. Lots of it. They scrutinize everything, especially the IP. Is it solid? Is it protected? Right, they want to know the value is real and safe. Exactly. So if Alex can show, look, our key patent isn't just sitting on the startup's books, exposed to every operational risk a new company faces, it's held here in this dedicated trust, legally separate.
Hmm.
That provides a huge amount of comfort to investors. It signals, like we said, a sophisticated, proactive approach to protecting the company's fundamental value. It reduces the perceived risk for them.
And makes them more likely to write a check.
It certainly helps build that confidence needed to secure funding. Yeah.
Okay, this sounds genuinely valuable, especially for certain kinds of businesses.
Yeah.
If our listeners are thinking, maybe this is for me, what are the key steps they should be considering? What's the action plan?
Right. Good question. The absolute first step, you have to know what you've got. So do a full inventory. List out all your business's IP assets, patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. Get a clear picture.
Step 1, know your stuff.
Exactly. Know what you actually own. Then step 2, assess value and risk. Which of these assets are truly critical? Which ones are most valuable to your long-term success? These are the ones you need to prioritize protecting.
Okay, so identify the crown jewels.
Yep. Prioritize what needs the strongest defense. Step 3, get expert help. This isn't really a DIY project. You absolutely need to talk to a lawyer or maybe an advisory firm that specializes in both IP law and trust law. They need to understand both sides.
Right, they had the right expertise.
Crucial. They can guide you based on your specific business, your IP, your goals. Then step 4 is implementation. A key part of that is creating that formal, legally sound license agreement between the trust and the operating business. It needs to be watertight.
That rental agreement needs to be crystal clear.
Perfect way to put it, yes. Step 5, check existing agreements. If you already have licenses in place, maybe for IP you use but don't own, review them. Make sure they align with this new trust structure or adjust them if needed. Don't create conflicts.
Good point. Don't forget contracts you already have.
Step 6, keep it current. Businesses evolve. You might develop new IP, acquire some. Your trust documents need to be updated periodically to include new assets and reflect any changes. The vault needs to grow with the treasure.
Right, it's not a one-and-done setup.
Definitely not. And maybe a final step, or consideration, transparency. Think about communicating this structure, at least the basics, to your key investors and partners. Letting them know you've taken this step can actually build more confidence. Shows you're serious about long-term security.
Let people know you're being proactive.
Huh?
Okay, that's a really clear roadmap. So let's try and wrap this up. What are the main takeaways from our deep dive today?
I think the core message is this. Using a trust strategically can be a really powerful tool. It's about safeguarding your valuable IP from the risks the main business inevitably faces. That's number 1.
Protection.
Protection. Number 2, it offers a way to centralize and manage that IP, potentially more efficiently. 3, it allows the business to keep using the IP it needs through those licenses. It doesn't stop operations.
Continued use.
Right. And 4, it can genuinely boost confidence with investors, maybe even customers, showing you value and protect your core assets.
On evidence boost.
Yeah. But the underlying theme through all this is being proactive. Setting this up before trouble hits is key.
So it really comes back to what we said at the start, proactively protecting your secret sauce. Doing it strategically, thinking long-term, not just for today, but for the lasting security and growth of your business down the road.
Precisely. It forces you, in a good way, to take that long view on the value and security of your IP. It makes you think strategically about how best to protect what makes your business different, what gives you that competitive edge.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully this deep dive is giving you listening some real food for thought. Maybe now's a good time to think about your own business, your own IP, and whether exploring an IP trust might be a smart strategic move for you. Thanks for diving deep with us today.